Hola, it's Illuminostic. I want to thank all you guys for tuning in. Of course, in this live stream, I am going to relate my contact story, which occurred in June of 2010. And I think it has some weight as far as contact stories go, because the next day I would discover that, every single person that I ran into, all of these people being totally disconnected from each other, had also encountered these beings. Everyone described them the same way. The message that was received by a lot of these people was identical. And there's some sort of absurd circumstances that surround a couple of the stories. So before we get too deep into it, I want to thank Tyler Mitchell, new patron supporter, as well as George Falco. Thank you guys very much. You guys can support us through Patreon, or there's a email for our PayPal if you just want to buy us a coffee or something. But the super chat, although I haven't enabled, we won't get paid for that because we're having some issues with AdSense. So this story kind of starts before the actual contact experience. And this is another element that I think is typical of contact experiences, that life there's this reality warping effect that tends to precede these kind of experiences. And you'll notice that I titled this video, Demons, Aliens, and Fairies, Oh My, or something to that effect. And that is because there are a lot of different opinions as to what these experiences actually represent. Ranging from contact with the superego that's trying to intercede before we destroy ourselves and the planet, which is an interesting theory, because I think myself and a lot of other people, the message we receive from these interdimensionals or alien beings or our future selves, whatever they are, is that we are on the brink of destroying ourselves, and that they cannot and will not intervene until the absolute last minute, that there are intergalactic laws and such. Hello, Jay. That prevent them from doing so. And so another aspect of what I'm relating is that some people feel like these are interdimensional beings, like the Greys, that are demonic and that they're not good, and that their intentions are maleficent. And for example, in Aleister Crowley and Jack Parsons' magical diary, where they took notes on their rituals, he drew something he called a lamb that came through what could be understood to be a wormhole. And it looked exactly like every abductee's description of the gray aliens. And this was, of course, a spiritual entity. So then there's also the fact that throughout history, all over the planet, contact with fairy folk or gnomes or any of these kind of what we would probably understand today to be interdimensional beings, this sort of reality warping experience that precedes the actual contact with the beings is described throughout. And I'm just making the point that I'm open to all these interpretations. The one element of an interpretation other than actual star beings, the fact that so many people in this town in Colorado that night experienced these beings and described them all the same way. Is Mark Zuckerberg a lizard? And Elon Musk an alien? They're billionaires, and that means that they're basically not good people, I think. So however you guys want to think about it. Let's not get too off course yet, though. Okay. So leading up to this experience, I had a lot of very strange experiences. This was 10 years ago, and I didn't use the internet much. So 1111 synchronicities and that whole concept has become very popular with the New Age movement. There's a lot of big Facebook groups, but at the time, I had never heard of it before. And the first one that occurred involved, we were talking about the numerological significance of the number 11. My girlfriend was an artist, and she's drawing, and she realizes there's 2 11s on this ruler. And then, a bunch of things along those lines happened. She called me when I was at work, and I put her on speakerphone so I could keep doing what I was doing. And the importance of that was that everyone heard the conversation that I was working with. She mentioned seeing bears in the front yard. I pulled some, insulation out of this awning that I was tearing down, and bear claws fall out and fall on the deck. So this kind of stuff had started happening very, very frequently. And so one day around this period, my roommate, who is very reclusive, or was very reclusive, didn't have a lot of friends. So I don't know how he got this message, but we were invited by Golden Light Eagle, who was a Sioux Sundance chief, to come to Farmington, New Mexico, and attend like a series of talks, lectures, seminars, kind of almost like a new agey kind of event, but it turned out to be to have a lot of substance for sure. It was an extraordinary shock, the stuff that happened. So it was a video message. We open it up, and there's this Native American with this big headdress on, and he's saying, I'm calling all the tribes from all over the planet to come to Farmington, New Mexico, where we're going to meet, and we're going to talk about the star tribes and star knowledge and all of this kind of stuff. So as I alluded to before, I wasn't very internet. I didn't use it, right? So it wouldn't have occurred to me to just get directions by doing like Google Maps or something. I don't even know if that existed then. But there was a phone number. So I called Golden Light Eagle, and I asked him for directions. And before I got off the phone, he said, bring your little native friend with you. And I was like, what? And he just hung up. So it's like, okay. So I closed the phone. And the next call I get is from my little Navajo friend. And in that part of North America, relations between Native Americans and white people are not great. So we had a sort of association, but it's not like we hung out or something. So I was thinking, there's no way this girl is going to come with me to this thing. But just in case this is who he was talking about, I said, hey, do you want to go to this thing with me? And she didn't hesitate. She said, sure. And it turned out that she lived on the highway on the way, so that we didn't even have to turn off the main route. We just pulled off to the side of the road, picked her up in the mailbox, back on the road, and down to the event. So I get out of the car when we pull into the parking lot of the hotel where this is all happening. And this guy walks up to me, and he grabs me by the arm, and it's like this charge exchanges between our eyes. And I was like, what the hell was that? And he says, man, I haven't seen you in 40,000 years. We got to get back to the ritual. And I'm like, what ritual? And he's like, just come on. And he takes me by the arm, pulls me around to the back of the place, and there's this Hawaiian medicine man in this like red ceremonial garb, and there's a circle of people that have closed. Later I'd count and realize that we were 12 with the shaman, I guess we could call him. It would make 11. His name is Reynolds Kamakavole. I'm probably butchering the last name. And he's apparently a very highly respected I don't know what they call their tradition down there. So he's performing this ritual, and he comes around and puts his hands on everyone's head, and he makes this like low, like kind of like the Tibetan Buddhist monks. And he says, just harmonize and let the words come. And it did not seem to me that he was leading anyone. He definitely didn't give us a script. Right. So we all make this high pitched sound, and these words come out. And at the end, he says, may the wind blow to confirm the power of my prayers. And so the wind blows so hard that gravel is flying across the parking lot. And that was, the first 30 minutes that I'm at this this function. And I think eventually I'll probably make a video just talking about all of the things that happened here, because it really was extraordinary. I experienced telepathy and but the long and short of it, so that we can get to the contact experience without taking 3 hours, I experienced telepathy that was undeniable. I didn't bring any money to the hotel, and I didn't get a room, and I was sitting in the foyer trying to decide whether we would drive back or crash in the car or what. And I hear Golden Light Eagle's voice in my head telling me to go to the third floor, go to the end of the hallway, take a left, and there would be a door cracked. And sure enough, and the whole time I was thinking, this is completely stupid. Like, there's not just going to be an empty room. And so I go in, and the blanket's kind of pulled back, like, go ahead, and there are leaves that had been like broken up and sprinkled all over everything, and some oil. So some sort of cleansing had been done. And I opened up the cabinet, and sure enough, there's Golden Light Eagle's necklace with a big corn and a claw. And also there was a Mayan priest that had a necklace in there and a deck of cards with a silk cloth over the top. And so, long story short, they had called us there to tell us that there were certain native tribes that had always been in contact with what he called the star tribes, or the star people, and that they'd always kind of been around, and that some of us were connected with them telepathically, and that sometimes we would think we were having a revelation or something. It might actually be a transmission from the star tribes. He told us that they cloak their ships in a frequency of light that we don't see and that our technology doesn't pick up. And so we returned home to Durango after the weekend, and I guess maybe a week later, I had joined the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. If you guys watched my last live stream, I talk a little bit about this character, Robert, who was the head of the order. And I mentioned how he had called me like 20 minutes before our contact experience commenced. And so I'm trying to make sure I get the order right. I think, okay. Yeah. So the day after we got back from New Mexico, I went down to the river just to sit and think and clear my head. I brought my girlfriend with me. And I was really having a hard time because I had experienced all these things which really tested the limits of my sanity, I guess. And even though there were witnesses to just about everything, and that a lot of the synchronicities had left actual physical items behind, like the ruler still had 2 11s on it, and the bear claws were still in the sock drawer. So I knew that I hadn't imagined all this stuff, And so I'm sitting by the river, and I'm thinking about all of this, and this voice in my head says, so everything you've seen and you still don't believe it? And I said, it's just too much like going insane. I just can't, telepathic connection to star tribes and all of these crazy coincidences and natives commanding the wind. And, there was a rain dance that it actually poured rain. The sky was clear beforehand. It was just a lot. And it had been going on for a few months pretty consistently. And so the voice said, well, then stand up and turn around. And I was like, yikes, because I knew that something would be there. And I stood up and turned around, and I looked, and I could see this little tiny sort of tear-shaped vessel sitting above the mesa. And while all this stuff was happening, I was very careful not to suggest to anyone around, like if I thought I perceived a UFO, I wouldn't say, hey, do you see that UFO? Because I didn't want to plant the idea in their heads. And so my girlfriend, I actually thought, don't say anything. And as soon as I had that thought, she said, do you see that? And pointed at it. And as soon as she acknowledged it, it was gone. Like it just shot off like lightning fast. And I was like, okay, well, that was crazy. So I think maybe 2 or 3 days after that, we're driving home from probably just the store or something. And the phone rings, and I'm driving. Back then I'm sure I only had a flip phone. And so I answered and put it on speakerphone, and we were almost home. And it's Robert from the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and he says, contact is imminent. And then just hung up. And, like I said, it was on speakerphone. My girlfriend heard it too. So we get home, and we lived in this massive adobe house with a, like half of it was glass all the way around one side. So I go in the house, close the door, and I see this little gray translucent, which is the weirdest thing. I could actually see through it. So it zips by the door, and I'm like, no, man, I've had enough. So we go back into the bedroom and we lay down, and I had a pit bull at the time. And if you've ever seen anyone get knocked out, their eyes kind of roll up in their head, and there's this very, very dramatic, intense, like it's like snoring, but it's like way, way, way over the top. So the dog is sitting on the end of the bed, and suddenly it's like someone just flipped a switch, and he just fell over, and he's snoring. His eyes are rolled up in his head. And I'd seen people get knocked out, and I'm like, wow, they just turned the dog off, you know? So the door opens. We hear the pitter patter of feet, like unnaturally fast, scrambling around the kitchen. Brr, 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 brr. And my girlfriend's like, we need to go out there and talk to them, you know? And I'm like, you know what? Fuck this. I've had enough. And I swear to God, somehow I managed to pull the blankets up over my head and just go to sleep. I'd had it, you know, I just did not want to play along. And so when I woke up in the morning, there was this unbelievably surreal music coming from the backyard. Like I had the sliding glass door open, and it didn't sound like, I mean, there was no beat, you know, there were no drums. It wasn't like electronic music, but it was something on the order of electronic music. It sounded almost like liquid made of sound traveling through different geometrical shapes, almost as if it was like bubbling up through chakras or something. I mean, it was the most extraordinary thing I've ever heard, but it freaked me out too, you know. And this is crazy because I've always considered myself a pretty open and brave guy, but it was just getting to be too much. So I didn't go out to the garden to actually look and see if there was something there. Eventually it stopped. So I had stuff to do and I go into town, and wherever I had gone, I'm driving back through the desert, and during this entire period, everything was really, really vivid. It wasn't like really, really dramatic, but it's like colors were a little bit more vibrant, and I felt like this feeling of connection, and suddenly it just stopped. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I called Robert at the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and I told him what had happened, and actually, this story I told in the last video, so I'm not going to go too deeply into it. But the guy who I went to go and speak to from the last video, I went back to his house. This was actually a different occasion. And when I walked up to the steps, he was visibly upset. And I was like, what's wrong with you? In the last video, I called him Javier. So we'll keep that handle for him. And he said, I went to my brother's house yesterday, and I looked up on the roof, or his brother was upset, and he asked his brother what was wrong with him. And his brother pointed to the roof. He pointed to the roof, and Javier said there was a little gray, translucent alien being up there, and that he threw a rock at it, and the rock just vanished, like it went into another dimension or something. So that was pretty weird. And later I would talk to Javier about this months and months later. And he said, you know, somehow I just know that they're coming right when we're about to completely destroy ourselves. Right. Like I asked him, like, did it speak to you or something? And he said, no, I don't remember ever having any kind of real communication with this thing, but he just somehow downloaded the same sort of message that I received and a lot of other people received, which I thought was interesting. So then I went to where I had been working, this place called Smart Enterprises in Durango. And I went around back to talk to the guy that sang in my band at the time, and he was my best friend. And when I walked up to him, before I had a chance to even say anything, he says, man, Topher just came over here. And he was like a sound guy for our band, but he also just worked like right next door at a print shop. And so my friend says he was, you know, like really, really upset. And he told me that he was sitting in his bathroom last night, and all of a sudden he felt something touch his arm, and he looked over, and there was this little gray being, and suddenly he wasn't in his bathroom anymore. And then next thing he remembered, he was just sitting on the toilet again. And interestingly, the reason he had come over is that he had borrowed a Tool CD from my friend. And he said, oh, by the way, I only made it to track 10, track number 11, which a year later I would turn the CD over and discover the track's 11 minutes and 11 seconds long, right? So the next song after where he stopped was a song about alien abduction. And he said when he told Topher that he almost threw up. He was just like, oh my God, this is too much. So that's two people. So then I go home and I unpack my groceries, and my friend shows up with his son. And he walks in the house and he says, man, you're not going to believe what happened last night. And I just stopped and looked at him. I didn't say anything. And he said, my son saw it too, and his kid was there with him. He's like 9 years old. I think maybe the kid started talking first. And they said, this little 4 foot tall, gray, translucent thing went running through the garden. He was a pot grower, and they were running around in his pot garden. So that's the long and short of it. We were basically, we were called to meet with these Native American medicine men and shaman that were able to demonstrate that consciousness could influence the weather. They imparted a bunch of knowledge about various aspects. I was also given a rock that was allegedly from the Pleiades, and I actually took it to college to two professors, took it to a laboratory and had it tested to see if it was glass, all this stuff. I'm going to make another video particularly about that rock, because otherwise this will just get to be way too long. But I never got to the bottom of what that is, and it's now in the possession of a Navajo medicine man named Night Horse. But there are still two specimens that my friend has in Colorado, and I'm trying to get him to dig them up so that we can maybe do some more testing and see if we can confirm anything. So now let's take kind of a critical look at some of this stuff, right? One of the arguments that people often make is like, why would these interdimensional or extraterrestrial beings come and mess around with, my friend Javier? He's an older ex-Mexican gangbanger, and me, what have I got to do with anything? And, Topher worked at a print shop, and a pot grower. Like, what are they doing? What is the point of all this? And at the time, I didn't really think too much about that, because what the Golden Light Eagle and some of his associates had explained to us is that we were going through a transitional period in consciousness, and that some of us would play a pivotal role in that, and that these star tribe beings were just extremely advanced and enlightened for millions of years, and they had come to help guide us through this pivotal process, because there is failure, and we could actually end up destroying ourselves. And again, there's a lot of elements that just really are difficult to rationalize, I guess. Because of all these people, for example, that encountered these things in Durango that night, I'm the only one that really is oriented towards this role as, somebody trying to lift consciousness and ignite the conscious revolution and all this stuff. It is kind of difficult to ascertain, what they thought they were doing, and why were they translucent. This is something that was consistent with everyone's stories. So I did at the time have this connection with, I guess, what you could call like inner guides. And I asked them a lot of these questions. And one of the things they told me about the translucent aspect of their beings, I guess, was that they actually aren't physically here, that they formulate the body of light, or the Merkaba that a lot of people talk about, and they send that as a sort of spiritual essence. I mean, if you're traveling at the speed of light, then time stops. So from your point of view, you would literally just zip across the universe. But then the question is, what are these crafts about? I mean, the Pentagon just admitted that it has possession of crafts of a non-earthly origin, and there are a lot of pretty reputable accounts. Bob Lazar is one of people that have supposedly worked with the materials that these crafts are made out of. And so, and also, I saw it. The teardrop shaped craft from above the mesa. I saw it once when I was one other time, but it was exactly identical. It moved the same way. It was shaped the same way. And I was delivering pizza, and I just came to a stoplight, and I saw it come out from behind a cloud and kind of like move around a little bit, and then it zipped back into the cloud. And I'm not going to say I didn't think much of it. I definitely, nothing I had ever seen moved like it. And then when I saw it again 10 years later, in the midst of all of these other experiences, I just kind of figured, well, that's what they're driving around. So if they're not physically here, then what is the necessity for the ships, I guess? And then, if you do research, of course, people say that there are all sorts of different beings here. And so at the end of the day, I think it is possible that some of the interactions or observations and experiences that people have with these beings, I think sometimes it could be a spiritual agency. I'm not totally unconvinced that this is some sort of presentation of consciousness, the superego idea that Terence McKenna had posited, that these were either projections in time from our future self that were trying to intercede with our planetary destruction, that these were manifestations of the collective unconscious, like Carl Jung thought, that are just trying to guide and develop us. I don't really have any really solid answers for any of that stuff, but I know what I've experienced, and I know that the night that I had those primary experiences, the big one, it was corroborated by a bunch of people in the same town on the same night, and the descriptions all matched. So we're absolutely dealing with something, some sort of phenomenon, that is experienced at least at times collectively. And that is, basically how we define reality, is our consensus. Not sure about Bob Lazar's credibility. Neither am I. But as it was presented in the documentary that I saw, I haven't done a ton of research. It seems, the feds are raiding his house looking for stuff, and I don't know. But as far as like institutional or mainstream credibility, the Pentagon release about having recovered the craft is definitely it's legit. So 2020, you guys, so far we have a pandemic or a plandemic. Jury's still out on that. In fact, one of my next live streams, we're going to talk about conspiracy theory versus the official narrative, because I think that the truth is probably a combination of all of the crap that we're seeing everywhere. And it'd be good to kind of try to sort that out, and I'll contribute what I can in order to hopefully shed some light where people aren't looking. So I think there's one more element of this story that I may have missed. Oh no, I did. I mentioned the girl calling me and telling me about the parallel. So thanks a lot for watching, you guys. I know some of you guys just came in. And I apologize. The story didn't take nearly as long to tell. But that's my contact story, and keep an eye out in a couple of days in honor of Jerry Garcia's birthday. I am going to play every Grateful Dead song and riff, lick, and solo that I can off the top of my head, and just let the camera roll until I'm out. And that could be quite a long live stream. So thank you guys again so much for watching, and we'll see you again soon.